Hey, what's up guys, it's Oakley, and we're going to be playing a huge battle in Rome 2. I'm going to be playing as Pontic. My opponent is Carthage. This is going to be large funds, huge army sizes. Rules were 6 of the same unit kind, and then 2 artillery max. So I've brought a bit of a kind of a standard historical build that you might see from Pontic. Obviously, lots of cavalry heavy troops, some of them being melee, and then of course a fair amount of them being drawn from the noble nomadic tribes. So mercenary Scythians always going to be featured in the tribes to the east. Very powerful ranged troops that could do a lot for early harass, scouting, and could tear apart enemy forces. So they're going to be a staple of Eastern warfare. So these guys are deployed over here, and what I've done in my battle line is I've backed them up with an Eastern Spearman, and then I've got a couple little hidden Pontic Peltas. In case the enemy had a cavalry engagement, I could bait them into these little ambushes. Meanwhile, the rest of my force is really strong in the rear, where I have kind of these scythe chariots leading infantry columns, and that's going to be slowly pushing forward. They are going to be guarded by 2 Eastern Scorpions moving up, and then an initial force of slingers backed by hoplites or hoplites moving behind that. And on the far right flank, I've screened with the Scythian horse archer force plus some Eastern archers and Thoreo's spears. My opponent has a large force of Carthaginians that are going to decide to sit tight on their hill. They have a mix of pikemen facing the front, 2 of the giant onagers, and then they have lines of Libyan infantry, Balearic slingers, a lot of peltas behind that, which is a pretty good idea to try and whittle my cav down, and then he has some Scutari cav and other lighter cav on the flanks. So a pretty interesting army composition, and I'm going to be the one who has to take the fight to him. I did want to address something real quickly before we get into the battle, and that is, hello. A fair amount of you watching this video may be new to the channel. I know a lot of you have watched my Total War content for a long time now, but just recently I launched the new Moments series, which is kind of a short bite-sized approach to history where we're able to cover interesting topics and themes. So I kind of slice it up where we'll do epic moments, deadly moments, tragic moments, intoxicated moments, all kinds of things like that. But anyways, I am launching the new series, so I just put out a couple pilot episodes, and this is kind of the pilot season where I'm testing the waters, and boy oh boy did that bear fruit. The first episode seems to be going viral, which has me very excited. I posted it got about 20k views, started to die down, and then after that it exploded right as of recording this. I believe it's pushed past easily 200,000 views, so it's exploding right now. That has me very excited, and it has led to a spike in subscribers. So there may be some people watching this video who are new to the channel. I know, as I said, a lot of you are longtime viewers and subscribers, but just for those of you who may be new, what my channel is about is it's a mix of Total War content. So Total War is a strategy game that mixes campaign level turn-based action and real-time battles. So if you haven't played Total War, definitely check it out. I do a lot of that. I cover the news and gameplay, but then that is kind of the day-to-day of my channel. The big events that'll be kind of defining what I do on my channel, however, is going to be the documentaries. So the Moments series is a newer short-form documentary style that I'm going to be embracing. I do expect to have that, like I said, the success is really good. I do expect to have that kind of hit its stride and come out every other week, and then eventually, if I can get it up and running, to have that come out every week. So expect that to be a staple. If you like that, definitely stay tuned and enjoy. And then in between, you have your kind of daily Total War footage and gameplay that you can enjoy. I find these battles to be very fun, and it's a platform for us to talk history. So yeah, that's that. Also, in case you want to see some of my longer form documentaries, I have done those in the past. I have about like 20 of them, I think, covering all sorts of battles, the evolution of the Roman legions, Siege of Jerusalem, lots of stuff. So definitely check that out. I'll link it below. For those of you who are, familiar with my long style documentaries and are a little bit worried about the direction of Moments, because it might detract from my ability to cover long-term documentaries, I would say in the short term, those fears are very real. I have put a bit of a pause on the longer, more labor-intensive documentaries. And the reason for that is I want to get the Moments series up and running. Once I get the format going, I can start to standardize it and start to outsource some of the artwork and kind of make it a recurring thing. And once that's up and running and I can outsource some of the work, it will reduce the amount of input that I have. and it allowed me to kind of get regular updates in terms of documentaries that are smaller scale while I work in the background on these big documentaries. So, give me a little bit of time to get that up and running, and we will return real shortly to the long-form historical documentaries. First one is going to be the Siege of Jerusalem. Definitely have to continue that, and then once that's done, I promise I will make a return to the evolution of the Roman legions. That one seeks to cover the history of the Roman legions from their very inception at the the age of the Roman kings, all the way up until the fall of the Roman Empire with imperial legions. So that's going to be a very interesting series. That is definitely very interesting for people. Anyways, finally we can get back to the battle. So what's been going on? Well, my Scythians here have been poking forward. They are cresting the hill here, and they have been finding lots of juicy targets. And so that's going to be their role, to stay fast and nimble and poke around at the enemy, see what is here. As I move up the hill, I start to see more units have dug in around the flank. And so I'm just going to be a little bit wary, and I'm going to come back after this cav that my opponent has forgotten to micro while he tries to take care of my other forces. Finally, he does wake up, but this cavalry is doomed, and sensibly my opponent pulls back. You never want to be caught chasing after these steppe tribes. They will just retreat, they're faster than you, and they will use the Parthian shot to tear you apart. That's what I'll be doing. I've got heavy shot as well, so this cav is going to get shredded. So the main line, what's happening here? Well, I've brought forward my skirmishers. My slingers are cheap. My opponent's Balearics are much more powerful than mine. And so they will beat me in a straight up fight. So I have to do a little bit of tricky stuff. And so that's why you saw me earlier charging in with cavalry. What that cavalry was able to do was ward these guys off. And it allowed my slingers to move in close. And while the enemy missile troops were redeploying, I was able to get some free shots on them. So that's a tried and true tactic that you'll see me employ. Anyways, now that we're going to be dueling, face-to-face, skirmisher to skirmisher, I will probably lose this fight. So the way to win this type of engagement is focus fire. So what I'm going to be doing is focusing fire on one of his units. He seems to be kind of splitting up his damage amongst various troops, but focusing fire is much more practical, because if you can knock out key units, that'll really greatly reduce the amount of incoming fire. So focus fire on getting a single unit out at a time and then proceed to the next one. It'll be much more cost efficient over time. And yeah, so this is working well. The enemy does have the support of their giant onagers. These guys are really expensive units that can dish out a tremendous amount of damage, but their accuracy isn't that great. They're better used against walls. You can see here the shots that do come raining in are going to largely miss my troops. A couple of them are going to hit clusters, but it's really not worth it in terms of the money investment. And then here comes the huge, slow, monotonous move of my armored corps, the true pride of the Pontic army. And Pontus is a really interesting faction. It would have been in Anatolia, and the most interesting part historically for me is the time of the Mithridatic Wars. I read an awesome history book on that called The Poison King by Adrian Mayer. I really, really, really recommend that. It covers it covers the rise and fall of Mithridates, and within that you get the three Mithridatic wars where he and his kingdom were fighting against Rome, and those are these were extremely interesting topics. It's so cool to see how those were driven, the fear around this rising star of the East, the potential of everyone, even the Greeks, to embrace Mithridates as a savior to them, a guy who could potentially liberate them from the Romans. And so you have the Romans who are, torn apart by civil war. There's the Spartacus revolts amongst all this. Rome is really teetering on the edge, and so you have a period of time where there was this threat of Mithridates being the second Hannibal. So you have 3 wars, very interesting stuff, lots of battles. And then on top of that, the character of Mithridates, the historical character himself, is infinitely interesting. The topic of the book is called Poison King because he was known for ingesting poison. He did that from a very young age, and he was known to try and basically take poison in little doses all the time to try and make himself immune. That part of the world politically was known for a lot of murdering of your own family for political gains, and so you would see princes and others mysteriously dying from poison, and so Mithridates poisoned others in his rise to power, and he tried to protect himself from poison. What he would often do actually with political prisoners or enemy prisoners is he would use them as kind of guinea pigs for different poisons and antidotes that he would concoct. So a very interesting character who was basically unable to be poisoned because the amount of poison that he took over time. So that's a really interesting character. And the practice of, you know, defending yourself against poison by having kind of this concoction that you would take daily to build up your resistance. And yeah, this elixir would be a very closely guarded secret, something that the kings in Europe would try and years after try and take and recreate over time, because there were poisoning threats, obviously in medieval Europe and other places, and they tried to reconcoct Mithridates' famous elixir that he would take to protect himself, and so they would have all sorts of different competing recipes to try and make themselves immune. So his legacy was pretty intense. Ultimately, he was defeated, but it caused a real scare for the Romans. In every Mithridatic war, when he was beaten down, he would go back, lick his wounds, and come back almost stronger than before. Every time, somehow miraculously rebuilding his power base, either by, digging into the treasure that he'd hidden away in mountain fortresses. Really crazy stuff. So I recommend that book entirely. It is so freaking interesting. In terms of his army composition, he wasn't necessarily that great of a general, and the generals that he had at his side were pretty good, but not necessarily that competent, especially against the Roman legions who, were coming to face them, who had had years of experience fighting against Spartacus, against other Romans, and so it was very hard to beat the Romans in open field battles. Although there were a couple reversals against the Romans. One of them actually wasn't necessarily against Rome's armed forces, but in one of the Mithridatic wars before it, Mithridates himself organized a vast conspiracy to kill Romans. I believe he ended up killing about, oh, here come the chariots. He ended up killing about, was it 60 to 80,000 Romans in the east. Essentially, what he did is he sent messages all throughout Anatolia to all the communities who were being racked by Roman tax collectors and had very, big animosity against the Romans. And so what he did is he sent messages to all the governors and all the people and said, on this date, rise up and kill all the Romans amongst you. And so that date came, and across the board everywhere, the people rose up and slaughtered Roman citizens and merchants and other people who were in Anatolia at that time, a region that was not under the control of the Roman legions but had big influence from the Romans. And so that was a really interesting thing that really appalled the Romans, and is one of the things obviously that led to the Mithridatic Wars, but it was a very bold move from Mithridates to try and pull off something like that. And so you have in the book that I was reading stories about what happened that day, slaughter happening everywhere, where Roman citizens were slaughtered in the temples. Usually that would be a safe space, but they were even slaughtered in the temples, in the streets. The blood-soaked Temple of Artemis, I believe, was famous for that. But yeah, that was just a brutal moment in history, and that's something that I will try and share with you guys in a future historical moment series, where we'll be able to cover brutal moments in history, Mithridates' terrorist attack, or the 80,000 slaughtered, or something like that. But yeah, that's why I started the Moments series, because little moments in history like that are infinitely interesting, but there's no real way for me to cover that in a traditional documentary. So that's about that. Back to what's been happening in this battle. Well, you saw me launch a chariot assault. It was okay, but the main problem I'm dealing with is he has a lot of these Libyan peltas, which have armor-piercing javelins, and those will shred your chariots. Same thing with the Libyan infantry, they still have their precursors, and so I'm gonna have to pull back with my chariots and wait for him to be distracted or waste his ammo. So yeah, that was a bit of a failed chariot assault. I did get 32 kills and 63, so pretty good. But I'm going to wait to chip away at the opponent. On this flank, my Scythians have been continuing to just digest whatever my opponent has on this flank. He did charge after me with some cavalry. We've been able to kill those. And now his infantry that tried to deal with me is also going to be slaughtered. I pulled up my hidden peltas, and they've been able to deal with these guys rather successfully. And so now we're going to close in on the enemy hilltop position. And why I'm bringing these peltas in here is, well, I want to be able to do use their armor-piercing damage to take out these very costly mercenary Samnite warriors. So that's kind of my play on the right flank, to come around here, get some cavalry around the back, and start to harass his units. Over here, I've started to engage with my units. 2 Thurio spears against a mercenary noble fighter. That fight is not going to go my way. But meanwhile, it's just a holding force, and they're going to be biding time while my phalanx starts to push up. And the phalanx was something that I believe the Mithridates did try and incorporate into his armies as he tried to reform them, pouring lots of money into his force to try and modernize them to contend with the Romans. During, I think it was the 2nd or 3rd war, where he came over to Greece, where he ended up using mass pikes. But anyways, another thing that I'm doing here is I'm sacrificing my Eastern Slingers. They're out of ammo, and now what I'm doing is I'm draining all of my opponent's precursors, and that's in anticipation of my big push with the Pontic Swordsman and potentially my Chariots. So here comes the push. Pelta's going to be moving in on the right-hand side, and we can see as their volleys start to rain in. The shields are going to absorb this, but it's going to start to wear on their health. And yeah, just as he retreats, that's going to be the perfect opportunity for me to charge in with my Chariots. I was forcing him to retreat. I'm going to bite a couple volleys, but then I'm going to catch these units kind of dead in their tracks. They try and reform and turn about to me, so I'm going to have to make sure I continue to right-click to pull through. And so that's what you see me doing here, pulling through his forces. He's got more units in the back, but I'm able to kind of clip them, hit them from the flank, and then turn back around. All of this disruption is going to allow me to circle up with my Cav, and we can watch the glorious charge into his disrupted infantry. He's going to throw a little bit of a volley, but the rest of my Cav is going to charge right in. Let's watch this. Boom, glorious charge in. So this is going to be a big mess up through the center, and I'm going to cycle out with my Chariots. So that's happening here. My Peltas are going to come in to engage in the flank. My Scythians sitting in the back, and then in the center, we're going to get a big charge, infantry versus infantry. Pontic Swordsman, not necessarily known for being too sturdy, but I have 3 versus 2, so I do expect this to hold up pretty well. Meanwhile, over here, my pikes are engaging with the enemy pikes. The enemy is going to be firing in with his onagers, which are going to be starting to take a chunk out of my forces, but I've been able to destroy this one, pushing in through with my pikemen and seeing them off. Meanwhile, over here, I do spot an opportunity to charge in with my Scythian horse archers. I did want to hit these Peltas to try and silence them, but my guys are light, and so they're not really going to do too much. One of them is going to charge through and try and hit his spears. My other cavalry force was supposed to charge in, but he's going to get blocked. And so now his Peltas are just going to unload on my light Scythians, so it's not looking good for my guys, but I was able to disrupt his African pikemen, and I have lots of volleys coming in here. Elephants, meanwhile, charge through the gap, and this is going to be pretty brutal. They charge after 2 of my infantrymen and are going to just tear through them. So the Carthaginians, obviously known for their use of war elephants here, teaching my army that these guys are a real threat. And of course, that's something that Hannibal was known for and the Carthaginians were known for. Elephants weren't necessarily that good in battle. A lot of the times they would run amok. They're more used for psychological effects. And yeah, here they're getting shredded. Once they're caught up, I have all my, well, my infantry were destroyed, but behind that I have slingers, and I have my scorpions here with big fat targets painted on those elephants. They're going to be trying to snipe them, and you can see them. Let's watch a couple bolts as they fly off. And yeah, those elephants are going to be seen off pretty handily. I believe they're going to start running amok with the casualties that they've gotten, but I think they've gotten a fair amount of kills from that engagement, so it's a pretty good trade. Yeah, there you can see they're running amok with almost 200 kills, so they flatten my infantry. But now, against light troops, elephants fare notoriously poorly. Up through the center, I've been able to pour through with some of my hoplites, and they're going to come after the enemy units in the center. Cavalry is now in the enemy lines, running amok, slicing and dicing. My chariots have pulled back through, still alive, still tearing through the enemy. This engagement is infantry versus cavalry. A battle that without much support from the enemy, I should be able to tear through eventually. Not the best engagement for cavalry. They obviously want to be cycle charging, but I vastly outnumber the Libyans. Meanwhile, in the center, the crush here of my own Pontic swordsman plus chariots charging in through the flank is going to be super effective. It's going to see them off, and I'm going to try and turn about and hit the enemy force. I got a pike unit here that I unfortunately charge in through the front on, and so that's going to kill off even more of my chariots, but I engage with some of them, and so they're going to be losing some men. But the battle is going very much in my favor. My general here is going to charge after Libyan infantry that were not formed up or braced, so that's going to be another nice pickup for me. And it's at this point in the battle where the enemy line has broken cohesion that's where your cavalry is going to reign supreme. So you can see them running amok everywhere. They're going to get into these peltas, and then my massive troops is just going to infiltrate the enemy lines. Some pikes trying to hold firm by the onagers, but their days are certainly numbered. Even some Eastern archers coming to the fight, helping to clean up just with their sheer numbers. And we're going to be able to turn about and help this front out. Or again, it's cavalry versus infantry. My opponent, I believe, is fielding here some noble... Oh no, these are pikemen. Oh, sorry, these are my pikemen. The enemy has, holy crap, noble fighters with 287. Those guys have been doing tremendous amounts of work. That's crazy. Oh, shoot, here comes a clean charge into unbraced infantry. Again, doing lots of damage once more. Oh, and these onagers were invisible. That's funny when they were out of line of sight. But yeah, the state of the battle is a pretty big, resounding victory for me. Took a fair amount of losses in certain parts, but overall I would say this is a very nice victory. Chariots still surviving, dying somewhat to friendly fire, but they're going to get their final kills here against this last unit. So that's it for the battle. Hope you guys enjoyed. And again, to those of you who are new to the channel, welcome, welcome. Stay tuned for more of the history content and also these Total War battles. I hope you guys enjoy this format. And then I think the mix of two is a nice trade-off where we get these kind of day-to-day exciting multiplayer battles and then the kind of higher value, unique content every other week. So it allows for a nice, consistent stream of, mixed content. So that's it for this battle. Let's end the replay. Take a look at some of the final stats here. I had deployed, 800 more men than the opponent, and I killed 3K. He killed 2,600. So really heavy blows being dealt to both sides. On my side of the battlefield, my general getting a lot of kills. Cavalry doing, where are they? Yeah, Scythians tearing it up. These guys are pretty cheap troops, light troops with 109 kills. That's really good work. Most of it actually being done to enemy heavy cav, so that is a good trade. My Pontic swordsman doing pretty well. Some of them not doing okay, but the Chariot here with 423 chevrons, that is awesome. The other one not doing too well. He's the one who got killed by a lot of javelins early on. What else can I say? Skirmishers doing good, trading well, and even my Eastern Scorpions here with a funny unit card, getting a decent amount of kills. On the opponent's side, this African War Elephant with 236 is very, very good. Definitely paid for himself. The two Carthaginian heavy onagers, definitely not good. I probably would have been investing in something a bit lighter, like Eastern Scorpions that could take out some of my beefy cavalry blobs from a distance. Onagers almost never pay for themselves. What else did well? Well, his Libyans cleaned house. Cavalry didn't do too well. Some of the Balearic Slingers did okay. The rest were focus fired and killed. And his infantry corps did really well. I mean, these mercenary noble fighters, when they got into my Thoreo spears and other units, just tore it up. Libyan infantry here were 243, 117, 102. These guys did really well. Even his pikemen doing really good. So his infantry corps was really solid performance against my guys. I think if he'd had a little bit more defense against my cavalry, prevented me from wrapping around, he could have done some serious damage against me. And again, I think that could have been achieved by switching out these two onagers for Scorpions, and then instead of having Scutari Cav that were out and about, he should have kept them behind his lines for the majority of the battle. Without ranged cavalry units, there's not much they could have done by getting out in the open field besides getting shut down my own Scythians. So these guys should have been kept in reserve. But yeah, that's it for this battle. Hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for more, and definitely check out those documentaries. See you in the next one. Peace out.